Welcome to the long way through Scripture. I'm Catherine Schaefer. This is a slow week by week walk through the Bible, taken without rush or pressure. Each week, we gently orient ourselves to where we are in Scripture and what kind of ground we're walking on as we read. So, if you're following along more slowly or closely, or want something to anchor your reading, there is a companion study guide available for this podcast. It's designed to sit alongside what we're doing here, not to add pressure, but to give you a place to reflect, pause, and stay with the text a little longer. You can find it in the show notes along with everything else connected to this journey. It is available on the website, in the store. This isn't a daily reading challenge or a checklist. You can start wherever you are, move at your own pace, pause when life gets full, or return later. There is no catching up required here, just the invitation to stay with the text, one passage at a time. And I'm really glad you're here, so let's begin. Week 13, we are in the book of Judges. So as we move into the book of Judges, the tone of the story moves in a way that feels almost immediate. Joshua ended with a sense of stability. The people had entered the land, settled. The promise had taken shape in a way that could be seen and lived in. There was a sense of arrival, even if it was not complete. Judges opens, and that sense of steadiness begins to loosen. The structure that held the people together does not disappear all at once, but it begins to weaken. The generation that knew Joshua, that had seen the crossing into the land and remembered the wilderness journey, begins to fade. And with that fading comes something quieter, but more significant. Memory begins to fade with them. The opening chapters describe a pattern that will repeat throughout the book. The people turn away from God, not always in a rebellion, but in a small shift of attention, in quiet compromises, slow blending of their lives with the culture around them. What begins as a drift becomes something deeper over time. Judges is not a book of steady decline in a straight line. It is cyclical. The people turn away, they experience the consequences of that turning away. They cry out, and God raises up a judge to deliver them. There is relief, restoration, and then, slowly, the cycle begins again. At first, the pattern feels contained, almost manageable. The early judges bring moments of clarity, where the people are pulled back towards God. The tension resolves, even if only for a time. But as the story continues, the cycles deepen. The space between faithfulness and failure grows shorter. The moments of peace become more fragile. The judges themselves become more complex, less clearly defined. What begins as a pattern becomes a spiral. There is a phrase that appears near the end of the book, but it captures the heart of everything that unfolds here. Everyone did what was right in their own eyes. That line is not just a description of behavior, it is a description of orientation. The people are no longer looking outward to God for direction. They are looking inward, deciding for themselves what is right, good, acceptable. And that changes everything. At first, it may not seem dramatic. It may even feel like freedom. But over time, the consequences begin to surface. Without a shared center, a steady reference point, the community begins to fracture. Justice becomes inconsistent. Leadership becomes unstable. The line between right and wrong blurs. Judges allows us to see what happens when a people who were shaped by God's presence begin to live as though that presence is no longer central. The stories within this book reflect that tension in very human ways. There are moments of courage and moments of hesitation. Leaders who rise unexpectedly, who carry both strength and weakness at the same time. The judges are not presented as flawless heroes. They are complex, shaped by the same environment they are trying to lead. Gideon begins with hesitation, questioning his own calling, needing reassurance before stepping forward. Jephthah carries both boldness and a lack of wisdom that leads to devastating consequences. Samson moves through the story with strength that is undeniable, yet his life reflects a pattern of impulsive choices and divided attention. These are not simple stories. They are not meant to be read as clean examples of right and wrong. They are reflections of what happens when God continues to work through people who are deeply human, even when the surrounding environment is unstable. And through all of this, something remains constant. The people cry out and God responds. Not always immediately, and not always in ways we might expect, but consistently. God hears and he moves. This is one of those quiet tensions of Judges. The people drift, yet they are not abandoned. They fail, yet they are not forgotten. The cycle continues, but within that cycle is a thread of mercy that does not disappear. The later chapters of Judges shift in tone again, becoming heavier, more difficult to read, more complex in their portrayal of what life has become. The stories feel less like cycles and more like unraveling. There is a sense that the foundation has weakened to the point where the community is no longer holding together in the way it once did. These chapters are not comfortable. They are not meant to be. They show what happens when the absence of a shared center leads to fragmentation, when decisions are made without reference to anything beyond personal perspective. The phrase returns again, anchoring the entire book. Everyone did what was right in their own eyes. Judges does not resolve this tension neatly. It does not end with a full restoration or a return to stability. Instead, it leaves the reader sitting in the weight of what has unfolded. And that, in itself, is part of the story. As you read through Judges this week, you may feel the emotional shift. The tone is heavier than Joshua. The clarity of direction is less steady. The stories are more complex, sometimes even difficult to sit with. And that's okay. This book is not asking you to find quick answers or clear resolutions. It is inviting you to see what happens when the center begins to move, when memory fades, when the connection to God becomes less intentional. The reflection to carry with you this week is this. When we lose sight of God as our center, we begin to redefine what is right in ways that slowly lead us away from Him. Judges is not only a story about a distant people in a distant time, it is a mirror in many ways, reflecting the patterns that still exist in human hearts and communities. But it is also a reminder of something else. Even in the middle of cycles, in the middle of drifts, When stories feel like it is unraveling, God continues to respond when his people call out to him. The presence that carried them through the wilderness has not disappeared. The covenant has not been erased. The story is still moving, even when it feels unstable. Stay with the tension, complexity, the reminder that even imperfect stories are still held within God's faithfulness. And that is where this portion of the journey leaves us. Not in resolution, but in reflection. In the space where the story is still unfolding and the need for a true center becomes clearer than ever. As you move into the reading this week, remember there's no rush. Read slowly. Read a little at a time, or simply sit with the passages if that's what the week allows. Scripture doesn't ask us to perform, it invites us to remain. Everything connected to this journey lives in the show notes. The full reading plan, the free 5-day Start Here guide, the study guide for this podcast, and ways to support the podcast through Patreon if you'd like to help this project continue. Think of it as the little ecosystem that holds this whole journey together. Thank you for walking this long way with me. And I'll meet you here again next week.